Hello, welcome to Team Franco Bodybuilding Podcast. This is episode number 46. And yes, I'm going to talk about the much often discussed topic of peak week. I almost dread it. It's kind of funny. I did a video 8 years ago, and I still direct people to watch it only because sometimes people get so excited or so confused. And I just viewed the video myself, and most of it still holds water today. A couple things I would change, and the most disturbing difference is how much I've aged over the last 8 years. But it's good to talk about this once in a while because, again, I do these podcasts for you, the listener, and also to have this on file to pass on to my current clients who have questions. And this one has been popping up more often, especially those that are working with me for the first time, so they are curious to learn what it's all about. I can end this podcast quickly and say, don't believe the hype. Peak week is really not that big of a deal. But then that would be quite boring and you would tune out. So again, I've jotted a few notes. I'm going to try to cover them all along with some stories, as I usually like to do. And we'll just take it from there, and hopefully I can help you guys out. So the first piece of advice that I give any competitor, and obviously the goal when I'm working with someone, is to be ready about a week or 2 weeks out from the show. And the reason for that is because you do want to coast in. You don't want to have to rely on anything or pushing yourself even harder, because the body has been under tremendous stress from excessive cardio, exercise, restrictive diet. So therefore, if you are ready a couple of weeks out, you can really coast in with minimal changes. But that to me also depends on if you're a first-time competitor and the division that you're doing. Now, the big problem is that first-time competitors get super excited thinking that miracles are going to happen those last 7 to 10 days leading into a show. And often, if they're following some knucklehead plan from a coach or someone who doesn't really understand the human body or just likes to trash them, they will go to real far extremes. And I've seen this dozens and dozens of times where someone might not be in the greatest of shape and they'll just be super depleted beyond belief, thinking that they're going to burn more body fat, where they're burning more tissue, and they end up looking squishy on stage. I've seen that. I saw a couple of competitors talking backstage at a show that I was at, and they were just talking about, the lack of water they had, and they water depleted and carb depleted. Meanwhile, and I hate to say it, they just weren't in shape. So typically beginners will go to further extremes in hopes of they need to, improve. Where they need to improve is just giving themselves more time, to lose the body fat. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I've talked about this in previous podcasts. The goal for a natural bodybuilder, again, for all the divisions, is to lose body fat slowly and maintain the muscle. And during the last week, it's about recovery and filling the body up a little bit. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that in a minute. But as a beginner, you have the tendency of following other types of bodybuilders who may be not tested. They can get away with different tricks and different things because they have the advantage of steroids, but your body doesn't. So if you try to attempt anything crazy, it's going to backfire. The more crazier thing that you're going to do, the less chance that it's actually going to benefit you, and it's just going to backfire. I can tell you, I've seen a lot of times, and more like figure competitors for some reason, that they end up being super shredded, but they're flat. And I use that word squishy. It's like they're so depleted, and that they did something, to get that look, where if they would have kept their water up or brought more sodium or carbs in their diet, they would have filled out. It's like, posing with a flat tire. It's just like drained. So I think that's something that if you question yourself and you're looking forward to the peak week thinking that miracles are going to happen, it's going to change your body, well, often you're just going to need more time to diet down. And that's okay. Again, I always talk about it's an evolution. You learn from it. You want to do the competition, and then you go for it. Because another thing that you always hear, well, two things. One, people are afraid of spilling over. And the other one, I'm holding water. Well, usually those who think they're holding water typically have to lose more body fat. It's point blank. Spilling over, I think, is quite difficult to do. And again, to spill over, you need to be super, super lean, and then to be obnoxious and go crazy with carbs and food and whatnot. Because again, the average person who still needs to lose some body fat, it's going to be hard for them to spill over because they have the body fat there to begin with. So again, these terms that you hear flying around social media, blog posts and everything, I mean, it can happen, but it's rare in my position that I've seen with people. Now, let's talk about the divisions a little bit. If you take even a top end experienced bikini competitor, they're going to coast in. There's very little that they need to do as far as changing their body. Because again, they're not looking for a super lean look. You can fill out a little bit, but it's the lesser extreme or lesser of a peak week of all the athletes, only because that division's not required, to have the crazy conditioning nor the super muscularity or anything like that. Yeah, I'll manipulate a little bit, but if you're ready, a week or two out, we're going to be coasting in and allowing the body to recover. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, this is where you can have some benefits, but again, nothing's going to be magical or crazy that you might be hoping for. If you take a bodybuilder or a top-end figure competitor, say at the pro level, yes, they're going to have more experience. Yes, they're going to be more in tune with their body. And if I'm coaching that type of person, most likely I've had a couple preps with them, so I have a better understanding. Now, this type of person, you can get a little more aggressive to deplete themselves only because they have more muscle to lose, or let's put it this way, they can afford to lose a little bit of muscle. Therefore, you have more time and the ability to fill them back up. Now, you're saying, well, how do you fill back up? I mean, we know how to deplete. You do more cardio, you cut carbs, fat, yada, yada, yada. That depletes you. And again, I'm not going to go into too many specifics, but what fills you up are the things that beginners and some people think that you need to not have, and that is water, sodium, and carbs. Those are the three things that bring out the muscles, fill you out the most. When you have more carbs, it'll bring more water in, so you want to keep your water high, and same thing with sodium. They're all like vasodilators. Basically, it's like putting more air into the muscle so it can pop. But if you're not lean enough, you're still not going to see it. So you see where I'm going? Because most of the people that compete in shows are beginners or first timers. So that's why less is more, so they don't destroy themselves and make it worse. But the top third, or those who are competing at the pro level, will get a little bit more aggressive and take advantage of the ability, because they're already super lean and they have the muscle to make these changes to bring out their best. Now, there's many, many tactics and many ways of skinning the cat. Again, let's take someone who's competed before but is carrying a little bit more body fat. Typically what I'll do with them is about 2 weeks out, we will crush it. I'll push it really hard. And depending how they are, about Monday or Tuesday going into the show, if I think we've hit and we're as low as we're going to get, we're going to, gradually bring the carbs back up, reduce the cardio so they can recover, feel better, and then bring in a little bit more carbs, but nothing crazy. If you have that person that is super tight, dialed in, then Monday, I'll start bringing in more carbs and taper it down so I can learn how their body responds. Therefore, that Friday, I know exactly how many carbs will be ideal, although they'll still check in with me and then I can make any possible changes. And that's what I call backloading. Basically, a little bit more carbs beginning of the week because you nailed it, you killed yourself the week before, recover, taper it down to see how your body handles it. And if it's holding a little bit too much, we still have time to drop it down, but then really nail it on the day before. Some coaches like to do the opposite, where they will, if someone's in great shape, they will hammer them, beginning of the week up all the way until, Wednesday and Thursday. And then they'll drive many, many, many carbs the day before. I think this can be successful, but you and that coach have to really be in tune with each other. And typically that person is super shredded and they have probably done a practice run before. So there's a lot of things to consider. And really the take home point is that be ready, be ready a couple of weeks out. And if you're not, keep on doing what you're doing, but don't go to extremes thinking that you have to. It's really that simple. Now, a common thing that does happen, and I've seen this with my clients, and they give me more credit where credit is due. They'll like, oh my God, the peak week is looking great. I've lost another 2 pounds, and I used to scratch my head about this. Well, it's not really from the diet or what they're doing, although it may be. But typically, you get so excited, you get more stressed, you have more, nervous energy going on. And I think that's what also contributes to losing a little bit more weight during that last week. I think that's something that people don't touch upon because you're nervous, you're nailing everything down, you're super excited at the same time, you want to be perfect, and your mind's racing. I mean, believe me, I've been there. So therefore, that nervous energy, whatever it's doing, it's burning through more body fat than any type of cardio that you have been doing. So that's something where stress, nervous, anxiety, all that stuff, I think that plays a role into the final week. And that's why being ready weeks out will eliminate some of that so you don't burn through any muscle tissue. That's something to always, to consider. Now, what I want to wrap up is don't do anything crazy. Years and years and years and years ago, I used to do some water manipulation and all that with myself and clients. But as we've learned, more water in means more water out. You keep the water super, super high, okay? The only time that I've ever decreased water on someone is if someone is too lean and too hard and they're doing bikini and I think they need to hold some water. So I'll reduce the water out a little bit, only because then you start to hold a little bit more and bring in more carbs. So you get softened up. I might have done that maybe a half a dozen times in my total career for those bikini competitors that I think was necessary. But I keep the water high. I may have some restrictions or whatever the day before, about an hour out, and maybe I'll tell someone just to sip water, but you never want to be too thirsty. But I give them a guideline on how much water. Sodium is another thing that you always hear about. Oh, what should I do? You keep it pretty flatlined. But again, if you are super, super lean, sodium can be a great asset by increasing it the day before and also the morning of with a meal or two, because the more sodium can make the muscles pop. If you've competed before and you're like, oh, I was kind of flat, I was not really nailing it and all that, but then you have that, those cheat meals, and the next day, oh my God, I look so great. Well, there's two things going on here. One, you posed your ass off, so that's kind of hard to duplicate. Obviously you want to practice posing the week before. And two, typically that meal is much, much higher in sodium and carbohydrates and sugar that you had in a long time. So the combination of those two will make you look awesome. Now, I do like to be a little conservative only because you don't want to eat so much and get sick and feel uncomfortable, but you want to make sure that you are not hungry the day of, and you want to make sure the sodium is adequate. And adequate can be anywhere from normal intake to a little bit higher if you are extremely lean. Same thing with the carbs. As I discussed earlier, there's all sorts of ways with the carbohydrates, but typically you do not want to limit your carbohydrates the day before, the morning of, only because you're going to look squishy, as I was talking about earlier. So those three things were used to be hot topics before, and trying to time, manipulate, and all that stuff is washed out. Okay? Again, it's being ready, it's being lean enough, so then you can do some tweaks and manipulations to fill you out a little bit more. And yes, I'm guilty. First-time competitors, I need to learn their body, so I won't be too aggressive. And a lot of them, don't really need to be too aggressive. But typically, that's the better way to go, because then you learn. I even learned from my last time that I competed, I took in more carbs and I did less cardio, and I knew I could have filled out even more. I don't know if it would have made a difference in my placement, who cares, but I took in a lot more and did a lot less cardio because I trusted my body a little bit more this time, and my mind. But at the end of the day, I look back, I'm like, you know what? I probably could have taken in a couple more 100 grams of carbs the morning of. Seriously, just because I was hard time getting a pump. And again, it could have been stress and nerves, but I learned, and I was super, super lean, for my age. Let's put it that way. I'll give you another little story where I've been working with a gentleman who's around my age, and we've done a couple of preps already. And basically, the first one was a little bit more conservative. He was well in tune with his body. And then we were able to get a little bit more aggressive in cutting the carbs, but then bringing more in so his body would soak it up. So again, it's all a learning experience, but the biggest thing to realize is don't rely on the peak week. And like I talked about in my video, is that I hate that term. And that's why I was joking around, the dreaded peak week. I call it the final week. The final week is about recovery, filling the body up if necessary, and just letting it slide, rolling into the show. So don't believe the hype of all the things that you may hear or see, or what one person may do, because you know what, if one person tells you to have 1,000 grams of carbs, or 10 grams of carbs the day before, and then the morning of do this or that, or consume packets of sugar or soda, believe me, I heard that one before. It may work for them, but you know what? What also may work? Not doing much or eating dirt, because again, bodybuilding, a lot of it's genetic and what you can handle. So no reason to get overly stressed thinking that you have to nail it down. Again, it goes back to being ready on time. I've said that about 4 times already. So I think, let me see with my little few notes here. I talked about spillage and holding water, recovery, and so I mean that's really it. I mean, again, don't freak out over the last week. Don't look for some answers that don't have questions, or that sounds about right. Now I'm getting slap happy. Enjoy the last week. Enjoy what it brings. Don't freak out. And that's about it, guys. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to hit me up, teamfrancobodybuilding.com. I'll talk to you later.